Me?
I got
Okay.
hey, does
Thank you.
the gut run the brain or does the brain run the gut? What is actually driving our moods? What is actually making you super cranky sometimes? Or why is this cranky? Why is she so she's so short-tempered? Whatever. What if it is that there's an imbalance in the gut? What if your actual mood is also sending signals to the gut that are impacting your mood? So we're going to be talking about this today. Naturopathic physician Dr. Jeannie Achuff is with me, and she is also representing Microbiome Labs today and is going to be educating about this. I have a special offer for you if you want to join in and get some of this and put it to good use at your house. Or if you're just here for great free information, we're digging that too and love spending time with you. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Achuff so she can get started with her presentation, and let's go. Let's get in a better mood.
All right. Thank you, Shivan,
Thank
a
you.
rock star for sure. Thank you for everything. So, mind, mood, and microbiome insights from Zenbiome Dual. So, as Shivan noted, I am a naturopathic doctor. My name is Dr. Jeannie Achuff. I am licensed in British Columbia and Canada. Been practicing for over 17 years with a focus on women's health and largely reproductive and pelvic health. I love the fascia as well, Shivan. And I am serving as a clinical science liaison for Microbiome Labs because I love the microbiome. So, nerding out today on the microbiome gut-brain axis. So this is a bi-directional relationship. The gut, the brain, as Shivan noted, which one started it? We don't know necessarily. We are researching that, and there's lots of cool information coming out. So what we do know is that, as many of you probably experienced, if something goes off in your gut, something is out of balance in your gut, something often goes out of balance in your mood, your energy, your motivation, and vice versa. If we're stressed, if we have relationship challenges, if we've got emotional challenges, those often will translate into something going on in our gut. And kids are a really great representation of this. Kids tend to demonstrate this relationship between the gut and the brain very clearly, very readily, especially when they're young. When something is off in their emotional life, they get tummy aches. Adults are no different. We're just really good at making things more complicated. So this relationship is a very clear relationship, but again, it's bi-directional. So which one started it? It's a good question, and it's a really unique scenario for every individual. So what we have here is early in life, our microbiome is colonized. Most of us know this. The vaginal birth is a really important source of that colonization. And in infancy, the microbes that are colonizing are affecting the vagus nerve, they're affecting immune function. We know from studying mice that are raised in a germ-free environment, therefore not exposed to any microbes, have exaggerated stress responses. They're dysregulated in their behaviors. We can tell that this relationship between the gut microbiome and the brain is really important, even just from that little insight through the study of mice. But we are now seeing increasingly through studies of humans and different applications of different probiotics that we can influence the mood, we can influence energy levels, and we can also influence gut health through, practices like meditation and stimulating the vagus nerve. So this relationship is a very dynamic dance. As we get older, during puberty, our microbiome does go through a shift and we move towards a more adult version of a microbiome. In the gut, we want microbial diversity. This is not true of all tissues in the body. There is an axis between the gut and many different organ systems. So we've got the gut-brain axis, we've got the gut-pelvis axis, we've got the gut-vaginal axis, we've got the gut-lung axis, we've got the gut-heart axis. In some of those systems, we do not want microbial diversity, that, for example, the lung and the vaginal microbiomes. In the gut, we want diversity. This gives us resilience, not only from a mental, emotional standpoint, but from, a very microbial level standpoint, like when we're traveling or when we go through changes in life, hormonal changes, anything that challenges our system. We want that diversity to give us more resilience. So the gut-brain axis. This is a depiction of just that bidirectional relationship. So The gut-brain axis, any alterations in this behavior can affect us behaviorally, energetically, mood-wise, and then can really be at a very cellular level disruptive to the gut function. Various pathways allow the communication between the gut microbiota and the brain. So the vagus nerve is a very significant one, which most of us probably have become aware of in recent years because it's increasingly studied in the context of stress and trauma. So the vagus nerve is really important, and the gut microbes and their byproducts are communicating with the vagus nerve. So that's a key avenue for information to be traveling. We've got gut hormone signaling, the production of microbial metabolites, so things like short-chain fatty acids that are also communicating with the brain, immune system communication. The HPA axis, for those of you who are not familiar, the HPA axis refers to the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So essentially that's looping in the endocrine system here in relationship to what's going on with the gut microbiome. Things like an altered intestinal permeability can affect what kind of communication pathways are healthy and effective between the brain and the gut. And then the tryptophan metabolism. So tryptophan is a key player in the synthesis of serotonin, and that is going to heavily influence brain function and mood as well. So as most of us know, stress can cause GI issues, but statistically speaking, it has been studied. Many patients report the onset of GI issues during high stress periods, and then the GI issues are maintained as the stress becomes chronic. The study that I've cited here is actually a study that was started during COVID. So they were studying the impact of the stress of COVID and the pandemic on people's GI function and the relationship between the gut microbiome and the expression of stress. So it's an interesting time, of course, to be studying this concept. We can see that stress does change the microbial composition of the gut. And one of the things that, of course, is near and dear to Shivan's heart is the SIBO phenomenon. SIBO, I have absolutely found in my clinical practice that stress levels play a huge, huge, huge part. And I used to have a fantastic remedy that I would use produced by a company in Europe called Unda. That was a homeopathic preparation of vagus nerve, and every one of my SIBO patients responded positively to the introduction of this remedy. So it really showed me that, that vagal nerve response in gut health, and particularly in SIBO, is a huge player. And we know that SIBO, for those of you who've struggled with SIBO, that condition really can affect your mood. So there's a lot going on at that microbiome level, not only in the large intestine, but also when we have that reflux that is effectively happening from the SIBO pattern. So just to reiterate, much evidence has been given that chronic stress can induce these changes, so physiologic behavioral changes, and causes abnormalities in our neurotransmitters. So especially serotonin, the catecholamines, dopamine levels. And then what we see is when the microbiome is affected, we also start to get more inflammation in the system. And so neuroinflammation, actual literal, cellular changes that are pro-inflammatory also can really significantly affect how we function, how our mood functions, what's happening in our brain, can we concentrate. That brain fog is largely a product of that neuroinflammatory process. So again, that bidirectional relationship, we've got, stress in our life can lead to distress and dysfunction in the gut, which then reflects back into our central nervous system with that neuroinflammatory pattern. So, no matter which way you slice it, we have to come at these patterns from two different angles, because it's not only behavioral and lifestyle, but it is also very cellular and, functional based. What we find, we'll talk a bit more about IBS today specifically. And when I talk about IBS, IBS, I learned in med school, 20 years ago that IBS, we really needed to look at stress and behavioral patterns because that's always playing a part. IBS is being studied a lot more in the context of SIBO, which again, we're looking at a functional pattern there. So we do have some really great cellular and chemical understanding of IBS, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that there is a nervous system process at play here, and that stress presence has a very physiologic impact. A few more statistics here. So we've got just showing that, the discomfort, the signs of IBS that people experience, the bloating and the gas. Many IBS patients report psychological distress as well. Now, something that's important to remember is that the pattern of IBS and the pattern of suffering from high stress, a lot of people don't report this, right? Or they don't make that correlation. So I often wonder, we've got these studies that show people who are willing to come forward and discuss these patterns, but I think it's a lot more common than people recognize, and they're willing to bring forth. So if you are practicing with folks, I always, I ask, give me the nitty gritty. I want to know what's actually going on. Let's look at stool patterns. Let's look at emotional patterns. How do they correlate? So we're going to look at 3 different neurotransmitters today that are specifically influenced by the gut microbiome. So the first one is GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It creates a relaxing effect by essentially sedating nerve activity. So it helps to regulate mood, sleep, anxiety. Of note, GABA does play a part. It's present in the brain. It does influence the brain, but the GABA that's produced in the gut does not itself cross the blood-brain barrier. So the effect of GABA that we see in our mood, in our sleep, and our ability to relax, that is largely coming from the production of GABA by these gut microbes and how they are influencing then particularly the vagus nerve. But the enteric nervous system is essentially the nervous system that surrounds and functions with the gastrointestinal tract. So I will be referring to the enteric nervous system a few more times. But just remember that the vagus nerve is part of that enteric nervous system, and GABA is specifically acting on that nerve plexus at the GI level to influence this down regulation of more agitated type behaviors. What we have in the gut with the microbial activity is producers of what are called short chain fatty acids, and you'll see SCFA that is abbreviated in a couple of places through the presentation. Those short chain fatty acids do cross the blood-brain barrier and are part of the production process of GABA within the brain. So what is happening in the gut translates to the central nervous system from a few different angles here. GABA is produced by several different organisms in the gut. And what I want to highlight here, and I'll circle back to this again too, but you see on the left-hand side, produced by B. fragilis. Some of you may recognize Bacteroides fragilis as a pathogenic species, which can be true. However, we have to be aware of different strains in the gut. So there are strains of B. fragilis, there are strains of E. coli that are actually commensal and beneficial and do produce metabolic byproducts that are useful for us and helpful for overall gut-brain health. So not all of these species that you think are pathologic are necessarily, because they're different strains that are functioning differently. And to that end, it's important to note that when we supplement with probiotics, particularly when it comes to gut-brain axis, there's a lot of evidence to show, and you may see it in pop culture, like, oh, probiotics can help your mood. Sure, but the strain really matters. So as you can see here, we've got some specific lactobacillus strains listed on the right-hand side, and then a couple of other species listed on the left. Bifidobacterium are huge players in the gut-brain axis. So keep your eye on the bifido as we go through the conversation. Both GABA-producing bacteria and bifidobacterium do modulate the overall gut microbiome as well. So they're influencing what's happening with those populations throughout the gut in a positive way. The mechanism by which bifidobacterium strains produce GABA is from glutamate, and it uses the enzyme glutamate decarboxylase. This process can contribute to, in a positive way, the increase of beneficial bacteria like Roseburia and Lactobacillus, both of which help to support, again, the production of those short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acids are also very useful for the health of the gut lining. So we want them to help restore and maintain a healthy gut lining and prevent that leaky gut phenomenon. Next player is dopamine. So what is dopamine? Another neurotransmitter. This one is not just inhibitory or excitatory. It plays both roles. Some of you may be familiar with the role of dopamine in Parkinson's disease. Others may be battling the dopamine addiction if you have teenagers in the house like I do, and the screen time just gets them. So we look at, what are ways that we can work with that pleasure, reward, motivation system that dopamine is so central to. Having a healthy gut helps us to regulate that. Again, we want things to be in balance. So a bit of dopamine is a good motivator. A bit of dopamine helps us to feel good, but we don't want to be flooding our systems with dopamine all the time, as is so easy to do with all this tech. Note is that 50% of the dopamine or more in the human body is synthesized in the gut. And the intestinal tract is full of dopamine receptors. And that can affect gastric secretion. It can affect motility. So from a very functional level, what's happening with IBS type patterns, stress related, some people have constipation when they're stressed. Some people go more towards loose stools when they're stressed. Dopamine is playing a part in this motility process and in what, how much blood flow is the mucosal layer of the intestines getting. So what we haven't circled or haven't discussed today, which I'll circle back to again in another slide, is this concept of lipopolysaccharides. So when we have a healthy, diverse microbiome, ideally, it's keeping in check the bacteria that can cause inflammatory processes in the body, that the bacteria, particularly gram-negative bacteria, that release this substance called LPS, which are lipopolysaccharides. So if we have too many bacteria that are producing LPS, that can promote more of a leaky gut. And when we have more of a leaky gut phenomenon happening, those LPS molecules can get out into the bloodstream, and that's where we start to see the beginning of and the perpetuation of inflammation, which ultimately can affect the nervous system. Specifically in the GI tract, those LPS can interfere directly with the dopamine receptors. So this is another plug for a healthy, diverse gut microbiome, is that we can effectively keep down these gram-negative species that produce the LPS, and then can perpetuate the dysfunction at both a local level and more of a global level in our bodies. So for dopamine, there are gut bacteria that directly produce dopamine, but the more significant role is that the bacteria are playing a part in metabolizing the precursors and modulating the pathways in the gut. So certain strains like the Enterococcus strains are able to produce dopamine directly. Bifidobacteria they're producing some directly, but they're also very involved in the compounds that are influencing the metabolism of dopamine. Specifically, the B. longum strains, the Bifidobacterium longum strains that we will talk about in Zenbiome, alter the availability of tyrosine and tryptophan, so those precursors to the neurotransmitters, and then they're helping to regulate host enzymes controlling that synthesis. So it's a very tightly managed system, of which the gut microbiome is a huge, huge determinant. So they're really these bacteria are really directing the show as far as how much is produced, where is it going, how are the enzymes functioning. So it's talk about micromanage. This is a very precise process. Of note, again, I said before, we have some E. coli strains that are pathologic, but in this case, there are E. coli strains that are helping to produce dopamine or metabolize those precursors, and we want them there. They are useful. Many of you may be familiar with the Microbiome Labs Megaspore products that are the 5 bacillus strains. So the bacillus strains, those are spore-based probiotics, and these strains have been shown to generate dopamine in vitro, and we presume then also in vivo. The bacillus strains, the bifido strains, the Roseburia that I mentioned earlier, all produce short-chain fatty acids. So you see that here, the SCFAs. That also influence dopamine turnover and receptor expression. So we want all of those, again, we want that diversity. We want all of these bacteria present to produce short-chain fatty acids and help not only with neurotransmitters, but also with just the health and function of the cellular, that mucosal layer of the gut lining. Next one is serotonin. So who's producing serotonin? Serotonin is also a neurotransmitter that regulates mood, as well as sleep, appetite, gut motility, and cognition. So obviously a huge player. We've been in the world of antidepressants for, 40 years now in more of a public consciousness sense of things. So I think a lot of us are familiar with serotonin, but many of us don't have that appreciation for chemically how much influence serotonin has on gut function from the standpoint of motility in particular. So for those of you who dealt with motility issues, that the player, serotonin as a player, may have become one of your primary focuses as you navigate this world of, what's happening with my nervous system, my neurotransmitters, my gut microbiome. Serotonin is found in the central nervous system, but 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut by what are called enterochromaffin cells. And that production is largely regulated by our microbes. So the microbial modulation of tryptophan to produce serotonin, which is 5-HT, is a huge player that impacts mood and cognition, as well as our stress response. So a couple of players as far as production, the streptococcus, again, we often think of strep as a pathologic organism, but in this case it is commensal and we need it to be there helping to produce serotonin. E. coli as well, and then the enterococcus strains and bifido strains. So here's a featured Bifidobacterium longum 35624 has been studied to increase plasma tryptophan. This strain is part of the Zenbiome Dual formulation that we will talk about momentarily. And in these studies on IBS, looking at the role of serotonin, we can see that the introduction of probiotics for as short as 4 weeks can change that the expression of the enterochromaffin cells, the gut microbiome, the production of the neurotransmitters, and really, start to make an impact. So it I think gives us a great appreciation for how significant and how dynamic the gut microbiome is, that within as little as 4 weeks, we could start to see changes that massively impact how someone experiences themselves through their day and in their capacity for life. So I'm going to introduce this term called psychobiotics, which I love this concept. It's actually first was introduced in 1910, so it's an over 100-year-old term. But in recent years, as we've become more familiar with the microbiome and we've studied it in increasingly diverse ways, we're expanding that definition a bit to include prebiotics, probiotics, enzymes, anything that's really influencing gut function and how our microbiome is affecting our neurological and neuropsychiatric states. So, as I said, we know that probiotics influence mood. The strain is really important. And what we will look at here is our Zenbiome Dual formula, which is a combination of the 35624 and 1714. So this is our 1714 dude who likes to show us how chill we can be. In this formulation, we have both the 35624 strain that has been clinically studied to reduce IBS symptoms, along with the 1714, which has been studied more in the capacity of stress response, brainwave activity, our ability to get more into that parasympathetic state. I love this combination because of the compatibility between these two strains and the ways in which it plays on that bidirectional relationship. Many of the people who I've spoken with who've taken this formulation notice something different within a day or two. So it's it packs a punch. It's quite a profound impact that the bifido strains have on the central nervous system. So this is the 1714. So this one targets the gut-brain axis specifically. It does help to manage the GI issues, but it is more specifically looking at brain activity and cognition and mood function. So this strain in particular allows us effectively to experience our stressors with less intensity. So when we get some space from the stress in our daily lives, we are effectively physiologically not experiencing the degree of impact as we otherwise may. So I love this, the impact that it has on perceived stress, which means that physiologically, you're not bearing the same burden as if you really were, riding all of the waves and intensity of the stress. And it also helps to lower anxiety as a result, because then we just don't have that same kind of responsiveness, emotional response to what we're experiencing from a stress level. So the 35624 similarly has been studied extensively. We've got 85 published research studies on this one, more specific to IBS. Now, I always, think like in conventional science, we like to isolate the parts, right? We like to compartmentalize everything. And so this one I feel like has been compartmentalized as specifically an IBS strain. However, again, that bidirectional relationship, right? So they haven't looked as much at the mood and cognition and brain waves with the 35624 as they have with the 1714. But we know the partnership between the two, there's just a really beautiful synergy that takes place, allowing us to create space effectively from those ingrained patterns between the gut and the nervous system, and then allowing us to change that landscape of the gut microbiome, slowly moving us more towards the general state of day-to-day state of relaxation, better clarity, brain, less brain fog, etc. So this is just a little chart to show the brainwave changes. So 1714 led to increased theta waves, which does induce a release of neurotransmitters, particularly GABA and dopamine, that help to inhibit some of that excitement, right? To bring down that excitatory process. It also supports alpha waves during social stress, and alpha waves are associated with meditation and states of calm. And the beta brain waves were reduced, which reduces mental fatigue and increases vitality and energy. So that's a really cool effect of the 1714. This is also featured in our sleep formula and our COPE formula, which are really useful formulas for helping us with day-to-day stresses and increasing our ability to get good rest. So here's just an image of the brainwave activity. So you can see on the left the placebo group, and on the right the increase in the theta brainwaves during social stress. The increase in theta brainwaves during social stress, so that effectively we are in a more relaxed state. And here's the study on the B longum, the 35624. So they assessed abdominal pain, distension, IBS severity. All of these markers came down within that 30-day trial period. Everybody's quality of life improved with the use of this strain alone. And then when we combine the two, the psychological, emotional, cognitive experience in combination with those physical symptoms of abdominal pain, altered bowel habits, fatigue, etc., that over an 8-week period was significantly brought down with the combination strain that we find in our Zenbiome Dual. They also looked at inflammatory markers. So from a very cellular level, we can see that inflammation came down, and then again, the mood improved. And then here are just two graphs to represent depression and anxiety, both being affected by this combination of strains together. And these studies were done over a course of 16 weeks. So depression, anxiety, sleep quality, quality of life, again, that bidirectional pathway between the gut microbiome and the brain. We see decreases in cortisol levels, the morning cortisol response. Some of you may be familiar with that if you've been looking at the relationship between your stress levels and your GI function. Then the inflammatory markers, right? So if we have a healthy gut microbiome and we're able to reduce our stress, then we are helping to repair the gut lining. And when that gut lining is repaired, then those inflammatory molecules can't leak through and cause more neuroinflammation. It's, the cycle just goes round and round and round. But we have to start somewhere, right? So as we said at the beginning, it's like if you interrupt the pathway through meditation, if you interrupt the pathway through probiotics, if you, reduce your stress, work on relational habits, all of these things will affect that bidirectional pathway that influence the gut microbiome, brain axis. But the Zenbiome Dual formula can be a really nice interrupter of that bidirectional pathway, and to help us to get some space, as I said, to help us reduce our stress response, and then begin that process of restoring a healthy microbiome so that we reduce inflammation, heal up the gut lining, and have a less, what do I want to say, less GI symptoms and, cellular kind of physiologic effect there. So the Zenbiome Dual, as I said, we have the Bifidolongum and a couple of other products, but this product is really wonderful for this combination of GI symptoms and psychological complaints, mood, energy levels, cognitive complaints, brain fog, etc. So that is the quick and dirty on the gut mood, brain. Where's my, now I'm out of my flow. But let's go to questions, and I'll let Shivan open up the mic again here.
Hi, very, very cool. Thank you. This is very hopeful. So
Yes.
thank you. That was great. Let's put some love into the chat for Dr. Achuff. That was great. I love all the studies and talking about like all of these possibilities. And thank you for giving us the strain specifics too. It's really, really helpful. And, it's so good to have it backed up by research and not just like, I love clinical pearls, but I also love the research. Danielle saying was really good, and it is. So if you look into the chat, check that out. And if you're watching this on YouTube or somewhere else, then look in the comments or somewhere around here, and you can find the coupon and the link to order. All right, let's get you some answers. How often do we use Zenbiome Dual, and for how long can we use it?
Excellent question. So people have, I find clinically, everybody's got their own preferences. What I like to do, at least to begin with, is taking 2 caps per day. Try that out for, a week, see how that feels. You could go up to 3 caps per day, but I like the 2 caps per day. And some people will find that they only need 1 cap per day. I have no issues with long-term use of this. The Bifidobacterium strains, I really, really like. I've used Bifidobacterium strains for a long time in my practice for a lot of GI issues, histamine issues, all kinds of things. So I don't tend to, with this one, go through like a rotation necessarily. It's more like what is happening in your life, and do you feel like you've got the space that you need? So typically that's between 2 or 3 months where I say, like, check in with yourself, see how things feel. Can you drop down to just 1? Maybe you drop down to 3, per week or something like that. But usually people will reduce their dosing a little bit around 2 or 3 months. And then many people find that they can go to just a few times a week dosing it. And then if you're in a state of acute stress or you're anticipating that something might be coming up, then you can go back to that 2 caps per day dose until that acute stress has subsided again.
And are you taking new patients? We have a lot of people asking about that.
I am taking new patients in California, yes.
Okay, so come here, Sadie.
So I have a California license, so I'm unable to see anybody who is not residing on the soil in California.
Okay, so how about in Canada?
I am not taking new patients in Canada.
Oh, bummer. I'm sorry, Barb. Okay.
But I can give referrals if someone would like.
Okay, and how can they reach out to you for referrals?
If you Google my name, on my website, there's a submission form. And if you fill that in and just make note that it was in reference to this webinar, I'll see that, and then I can flag it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, cool. I know, Barb. Don't worry. She'll refer you to someone great, Barb. Okay. Can taking GABA and L-theanine liquid help mood, sleep, stress, and SIBO IBS? Hi, Dara.
Yes, potentially those. Yeah. It's a very individualized response I find when it comes to supplementing with, amino acids and anything that's going to be affecting neurotransmitters and mood. So it's a little bit tricky to know exactly what else is going on with your system and how to target that. So that is a question that I would say, especially in the context of GI health, you would want to take to somebody who really knows you and can get to know your particulars. I highly recommend doing some kind of stool testing and or neurotransmitter testing before you start to supplement with those things. But, as we know, people do kind of test things out. So it's in small quantities. Those could certainly affect what's happening with GI function. But if you want to have the best effect, I would have somebody really look at that with you and, have a thorough exploration and some testing done.
Yes, absolutely. Barb, find her website. What's your website?
So my practice name is Origins of Health Natural Medicine.
Okay.
And then if you type that in with my last name, the only other Achuff is my dad, and he's retired. So
okay. So look up her website and reach out in her contact form. So we're going to go a little bit faster because now we have more questions and we do have minutes left in the time. Can you please discuss lithium rotate? Is it rotate?
Oh, lithium orotate.
Orotate, yeah.
I would say in the context of this conversation, that would be a rabbit hole that we probably don't have time to go down.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay. And then for the stool test and neuro test, guys, put your questions in the Q&A box because I got to do it in order. Addressing considerations with complexity of neurodevelopmental and psychiatric conditions in pre and adolescence, taking SSRI and antipsychotic. So could Zenbiome Dual play a role of support there? I realize you're not their doctor. This is just a commentary for them to use with their provider.
Yeah, so I think that the concept of, I always tell people, there may be an ideal, many of us hold an ideal not to be on medications, on pharmacological agents, right? But when we do, when we look at our microbiome, when we do work at this level, I find that the manner in which we use pharmacologic agents often shifts, right? Whether it's, we maybe can use a lower dose or maybe we have fewer medications. So addressing the microbiome, I think, is a really great foundational way in which to kind of bring the system into a better balance to therefore respond more optimally to the pharmacologic agents. So I think that, yes, partnering this with whatever other care you're getting is a great, that's a great consideration. And I would certainly propose that to the provider. And, if they're not very familiar with the use of probiotics in this context, point them towards microbiome labs. We've got tons and tons of education. Kiran Krishnan that Shivan mentioned before has lots of even just YouTube videos. There's a lot of amazing research, like 2,000 or 3,000 articles every month on the microbiome. So it's just a matter of getting educated. And if the provider isn't willing to do that, then I would say find another provider.
And any idea on the shelf life of Zenbiome Dual?
Yeah, so it is stable at room temperature. It does not need to be refrigerated. I have traveled with it all over the place. You just want to keep it out of extreme heat and or cold. It's about, I believe, an 18-month guaranteed shelf life. I'd have to double check that, but I absolutely would feel confident in it in those first 18 months, assuming it had been handled properly.
Okay. Okay. And then is there anyone who shouldn't take this product?
Excellent question. There is nothing that comes to mind as a contraindication. We don't have any studies to demonstrate contraindication. We do use caution with all probiotic dosing, like this is an adult dosing on the bottle. So when it comes to pediatric dosing, you would want to have that, more based on weight and or age. So that tends to be a gradient. So I won't go into sort of all of the nuances of that, but generally for adults, this is a safe formulation. If you have concerns or you are on other medications, absolutely take that to your provider and, have them give it a once over, but it's a generally safe formula.
They say certain foods and even herbs produce dopamine or other neurotransmitters. Is that always by way of bacteria? How do foods consumed result in bacteria actually produce these neurotransmitters afterwards?
Yeah, so I love to, like, I do the Biome FX consults when we look at stool tests, right? And there's a lot of different stool tests out there. And, there's some incredible results that we can see, like shifts in the microbiome just by adjusting our food. So what we are eating absolutely does affect, and we actually, sorry, I'm gonna space on the number here, but I think it's within 2 to 3 days our microbiome changes depending on what our dietary habits are. So it's quite a rapid shift. We can improve in both positive ways and negative ways what's happening with the microbiome. So eating foods that, tryptophan, tyrosine, all of these precursors to the neurotransmitters, those are going to be metabolized by the gut microbes and will help to produce neurotransmitters. Now, it depends on the individual as far as how much you can move that dial from strictly dietarily measures and what's your patience with it, right? Like if you're like, I'm in this for the long haul, I'm going to give this, 3 to 6 months of really overhauling my diet and see if that changes what's happening from a neurotransmitter standpoint because of the gut microbiome, have at it. Or you can supplement and add some in and support the thriving of those populations so that all of the food that you're putting in is being better utilized. But yes, ultimately, how we eat and what we eat will be affecting the gut microbiome, and then metabolically, what they do with that food will affect our neurotransmitters and therefore our mood.
My GI recommended taking L-glutamate for GI issues. What do you think about that?
L-glutamate or glutamine?
She's saying glutamate, but
I'm assuming glutamine,
yeah.
probably. Yeah. The glutamine is a fantastic way to support gut healing. It is a lot of people. I think it's become sort of trendy in the sense of like, oh, this will fix everything. It's not going to fix everything. So, if your provider recommended that you take it, they obviously know your case. They know you. There's some foundation upon which that recommendation was made. So, I would trust that. L-glutamine can be very helpful. It is helps. It's a fuel for the gut cells, so the intestinal cells. So it may be it may be fantastic for you.
Does anything help with panic disorder?
Panic disorder. Well, from a microbiome standpoint, I'm very cautious with generalizing anything because we all have our own unique situation. And of course, whatever else is going on in our life and our biochemistry would influence. This formulation, the Zenbiome Dual, is so calming that, it would be something that I would keep in mind for panic disorder. Obviously the vagus nerve response is going to be a huge player, and that is something that this formula does target. But I would also think, kind of what you were speaking to earlier, Shivan, like visceral work, fascial work. There's so many factors that go into supporting our nervous system. And so with something that's as intense as panic disorder, I would look at it from a few different angles.
Okay. Institute of Functional Medicine is a great way to find some practitioners. Some of you are asking. What about prebiotics to help feed those bacteria?
Yeah, great question. Lots of good prebiotics on the market. We at Microbiome Labs have one called Mega Pre, which I absolutely love. It's comes in a powder and a capsule. I find it to be very gentle, but it's one of those things that we would want to go low and start low and slow with, just because introducing especially prebiotics can be disruptive to what is your normal bowel behavior. But the prebiotics, yes, would help to seed the gut with all of the bacteria that are helpful for proper mood and production of neurotransmitters and maintaining gut health and all those short chain fatty acids. We will have another prebiotic coming on the market next spring, I think, for those who have even more sensitive systems.
Oh, that's great. The SIBO population will be very glad to hear that.
Yes. Yeah.
Any word on Zenbiome Dual with dizziness?
Dizziness. Excellent question. I'm reflecting here in this moment because I am someone who has the great pleasure of dealing with vertigo from time to time.
Sorry.
And I do, yeah, I find this to be a stabilizing formula actually, but there's a lot that goes into dizziness, right? So it's where it's coming from would be a huge factor in determining what a good measure would be to take to support it and to try to reduce it. But yes, from the nervous system standpoint, I think this is worth a try.
Okay. Can this be used while taking other products, for example, if you're taking Zencope in the morning?
Yeah, so Zen Cope is the formula that is more about helping us to cope with stress through the day. It contains saffron, which I love, which also helps with mood regulation. So sometimes what people will do is they'll take the Zen Cope in the morning and then the Dual at night. And often when they're in that habit, I will have them only take one cap of the Zenbiome Dual because they've already got the 1714 strain in there. But again, it would be tailored to kind of what else is going on with your sleep patterns, nervous system function, bowel function, etc.
Okay. Would eating prebiotic foods or taking Mega Pre, for example, before or with probiotics make the benefits of the probiotics furthered?
Yeah, I think partnering them in, temporal proximity does, does pan out. The microbes are there, though, they're going to stay in your system. So when you're feeding them, whenever that happens, is going to be beneficial. But certainly taking them together, I don't know that it's been studied from a quantitative standpoint, but theoretically, I do that sometimes where I'm like, ooh, I want this and this together, and we're going to really go for it.
Yeah. Are probiotics recommended if you're immunocompromised, like having neutropenia?
Yeah, so with anything that's going on at the immune system level, I always want you to be talking with your own provider who has a good sense of what the specifics are that are happening with your system. In the case of neutropenia, theoretically, if that's the only thing, I wouldn't be too concerned, but I would just want to make sure that there isn't anything else that needs to be taken into consideration in administering probiotics.
And what about, so just some clarity, best time to take, morning, evening, with or without food? This comes up every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I am a fan of probiotics with food personally, unless you forget it. But with these guys, my favorite time with the Zenbiome Dual is actually with dinner because you're kind of preparing yourself for that nighttime winding down, and the 1714 is a beautiful support in bringing that parasympathetic response into play and helping you wind down for the night.
Okay. Temporal proximity just means timing close together, right?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Natalia saying I tried, it worked. You guys, somebody's saying, hey, you missed my question. I'm kind of popping around. Would taking L-theanine contribute to gut and brain health along with bifidolongum at 1714?
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially. Okay. How many months should we take it to see a positive change in health? Everybody's different, of course, Natalia. It's, you tried the link and it worked. Okay. And you're considering trying this. And you were saying about how fast it worked. People were seeing results and everyone's different.
Everyone's different.
Some people were noticing it quite quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Of all there is to know about the gut microbiome, how much of what's there is and what's happening do we actually know? Very little. Good question. Very little. We are just the tip of the iceberg.
Yep. More than we did 10 years ago, but
more than we did yesterday. But
yesterday.
Yeah. Please go to SIBO_SOS YouTube channel and check out everything from Dr. Mark Pimentel, Dr. Ali Razai. They are literally mapping the small intestine, and it is really an exciting time. What happens when someone stops taking Zenbiome? Is this something that has to be taken in perpetuity? Should any supportive herbs or supplements be used in conjunction?
Yes, I love this question because the basis of my practice for the last almost 20 years has been essentially on how can I help this person move the dial such that they don't have a countertop full of bottles. So what can we do to change the landscape? One of the things I love about working with the microbiome is that we can change the landscape. So the body can get into these patterns sometimes where if we keep doing what we've always done, we're never going to come over that hurdle, right? Nothing's ever going to shift. So we need to do something that's going to help us get over the bump and, enter into essentially a new zone so that we have access to like different bacterial behavior, different personal behaviors, different outlook, different food habits, different cravings, all of these things. So I find that the introduction of probiotics can really help us to change that landscape and effectively give us space between ourselves and our old habits such that we can make different decisions. So ideally, what I would see when we're doing work with the microbiome is that there's an initial push. So for example, with this formula, there's an initial push where I would say, again, probably 3 months of keeping it more or less at the 2 caps a day dosing. And then you can drop it down to 1 cap a day. But I would stay on it for probably 6 months or so and really stay tuned into like, how am I feeling? What am I doing? How are my behaviors? Am I getting some space from my mood? Am I getting, access to create change in my life and my outlook, all of this? And then you can have it more on hand for, as I said before, like an acute stress type of situation. So you're effectively, you're shifting yourself into a different gear with the
Nice.
help of this tool. And then hopefully you can, you're riding your bicycle by yourself.
Probiotics cannot populate the gut long term. It doesn't colonize per se, right? And remember, you've got the bad players, which are like SIBO overgrowth, and then you have the good players. And remember, when the SIBO clears, the neighborhood that now is free of the gangs can have better relationships, and it keeps, repopulating in a proper way. Barb, you know all that. Keeps telling my email is invalid. Darlene, do you know, Dr. Achuff, the customer service at Microbiome Labs?
Oh, goodness.
Sorry, I know.
I don't off the top of my head.
Support. I don't want to say, but if you go to the website, they should have a way for you to get support. Darlene, I'm sorry, it's not accepting your email. Is it okay to start with 1 capsule and then move to 2 after a few months?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is it good for stage 3 HPA axis dysfunction?
That's one of those questions where I would want to know more about you. I would certainly consider it. Yes.
Okay, I have CKD stage 4. Are they safe for me?
Similarly, I would want to know more. It is a safe formula. I don't have a lot of concerns, but I just, yeah.
Look, this is a free webinar on the internet, so she's not going to be like overly specific to your very serious situation, which you don't want that. You don't want somebody coming on here and going, oh yeah, no problem. You got stage 4. Oh yeah, that's fine. Please, we want you to be safe.
Yeah.
Okay, what about pregnancy? Speaking of which, talk to your provider. A lot of them want to know, but do some research yourself and follow your intuition and, start slow and see what you think. But work with your doctors on that. So this person, I just found in Economic Times article titled Warren Buffett Lifestyle at 94 will surprise you. And basically that he has a totally terrible diet. And yes, all those things affect the microbiome. He's 95 now, and he's an incredibly high performer, pleasant person. So the question is, can you explain neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and not being horrible even at his old age? This is where I think you might need a little retweaking with your thinking. Genetics isn't the answer because the microbiome is very much shifted after birth throughout life. That's true, but your genetics are not. So he has maybe all of these wonderful pathways and detoxing and different, serotonin uptake and not comped homozygous and all that stuff. And so he just maybe won the genetic lottery, and they are overcoming all of these obstacles that he continues to put into his body. Hear about people, my uncle sat on the porch and smoked cigars and drank a bottle of whiskey. He lived to 103. Well, if I did that, I would be dead. Okay. Like, my genetics are not supporting that behavior. So yeah, and maybe my microbiome would be total crap. However, a lot of the detox and drainage pathways might be open.
Let's keep in mind that he also was born into an era of the earth where glyphosate was not in all of his food.
Yeah. Serologist type food was also different back then. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a really good point. Really good point. Okay. We are 1 minute over. Do you have 5 more minutes, Dr. Achuff?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very generous. Does Zenbiome impact the neuroinflammation associated with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's?
Oh, so we do not have studies on that. Theoretically, I would think it could be helpful, but it's not the first agent. These aren't the first strains that I would go to for that per se. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Can we purchase in Canada? A lot of people asking about that.
So if you set up the practitioner account the way that you have them doing it, Shivan, they should be able to have things shipped to themselves in Canada. As practitioners in Canada, we cannot provide these formulations because they don't have, for those of you in Canada will understand this, they don't have an NPN number.
Okay.
So you as a consumer can personally order them and you are capped out because of Canadian regulations at the 90-day, can only order a 90-day supply, but you should be able to have it shipped to you, yes.
And I hear there's a postal strike in Canada right now.
There's that.
There's that. So everyone's in the same boat with that.
I think they
Um,
use FedEx though, so it may not apply.
okay.
Yeah.
I was about to purchase the Megaspore product, but was recently told that I'm stage 3 HPA axis dysfunction. You just kind of addressed that. Would it be better to purchase Zenbiome Dual and switch down the road later to Megaspore?
Yeah, that is another one that I would say take to your provider because the introduction of Megaspore can be nuanced.
Okay.
You want to do that carefully.
And just remember, if you're super sensitive, start very slowly. You can take it out of the capsule and put it on, the tip of your finger and just lick it or whatever. The best way to know which Zenbiome product you need.
Yeah, so the Zenbiome Dual, if you have any digestive distress, this one is more, because of the 35624, it targets that physiologic, phenomenon, whether it's constipation or diarrhea, the IBS type of expression. So it's useful for that. But I do have patients who use it in the absence of overt GI distress just because of the nice combination of supporting more of that physiologic function with the 35624 in addition to the nervous system with the 1714. But for daily stress support, like I have to travel a lot for this job and I don't love airplanes. So I take Zenbiome Cope to help me go through that process. And
Yeah.
then when I'm in a different time zone, I take the sleep because that is going to help me. And that stuff knocks me out. The Zenbiome sleep absolutely does. So, I keep all three around. But my daily, just when I'm at home and I'm in my routine, my daily use is with the Zenbiome Dual.
And is it gluten free? And dairy?
Yes,
Okay.
I have celiac and I screen everything. It is gluten free.
Okay. Noreen, just go ahead and look at our website. Any contraindications for taking Zenbiome Dual? I'm already taking Restore Flora and IgY immunoglobulins. Will it be okay to add the Zenbiome products with these?
Yes, we pair those all the time. One thing to note is that the 1714 in particular does not play well with the spore-based probiotics, so we've spaced them by 4 hours. And by not playing well, I just mean that you're losing some of the efficacy.
Okay.
So if you're taking the Restore Flora or Megaspore, give 4 hours before you dose with any of the Zenbiome
Right.
probiotics.
Great. How does postbiotics affect the microbiome and the mood?
Yeah, so that could be a very long answer, but effectively postbiotics, we're stimulating oftentimes the GALT, the gut-associated lymphatic tissue, and therefore that helps with immune system function, short-chain fatty acids, gut lining integrity. So there's a cascade there that ultimately, as I said, would take me a while to outline for you, but it all is connected and it is supported there.
Okay. What do you mean? Okay. How can you test for serotonin and transmitter testing? Are you thinking of oat test, organic acids test?
Yeah, so typically that's the is it Great Plains that does the oat testing? Yeah, a urinary test. That's typically where we look for that. Yeah.
Okay. I have my second SIBO test October 8th. Okay. My first antibiotic treatment for SIBO was May 2025. It didn't help symptoms. Oh my gosh. Okay. Which product should I use or do I need to wait until my SIBO results are in? Okay. Well, hold on. Let me just say this. Like, did you do a prokinetic? Did you retest? Did you do the 9-step algorithm as developed by Dr. Pimentel, Stephen Sandberg Lewis, and Dr. Allison Seebecker? Like, Kathy, I'm just really interested. Like, did you do all that? And that's why it didn't work. And there you go. Go ahead, Dr. Achuff.
Yeah, well, there's so many details that I would want to know about. You could begin taking this before were they getting results back or they're submitting their sample back on the 8th?
I just lost the question. I think they're retesting.
They're retesting. Okay, so I always recommend Don't introduce any new factors just before you retest. Let the test be representative of what you've been doing and how you've been managing your treatment plan. And then as soon as you submit your sample, go ahead and try the Zenbiome Dual.
Certain probiotics are problematic when having SIBO. Not sure if it's all forms of SIBO and when to know which probiotics one can take. Here's the thing. This is what Dr. Seebecker talks about with probiotics, and that is start slow, see how you're doing. Like you just said, don't introduce anything. Like, let's say you have a treatment and you're like, I'm doing pretty well. Like, that's not the time to introduce a new probiotic. Like, if you're doing a treatment and you want to introduce the probiotic while you're doing the treatment, that's fine, or beforehand. But like, once you get a clear test and you've done the testing, then, it's really so individualized. I'm literally contradicting myself right now. Like, please, just whatever you do, go slow. And there are some, like when you're seeing that some of these strains help IBS, remember that SIBO is IBS and IBS is SIBO. We have a world of wonderful foodies out there who are low FODMAP people who are making it sound like the only thing you need to do is to be on a low FODMAP diet. And that is 1000% incorrect. That can help with reducing symptoms. Low fermentation is a broader, but please don't get stuck in this FODMAP cycle. Sorry. Go ahead, Shivan. Keep going with everyone else's questions. Okay. Can she say a little bit more on certain meds that shift the microbiome? In which ways do they do that? What role probiotics play in helping that? And you're talking about beyond the antibiotic class of drugs.
Yeah, well, there are many, many. And in fact, I just pulled out an updated list that I haven't even had time to review yet. But think birth control pills. We have a meeting next week with our team who review the stool tests to look at trends involving like how are GLP-1s affecting the microbiome? How are antihistamines affecting the microbiome? So there are studies on some of those out there, but I don't have concrete information because I've done a lot of women's health over the years. I certainly can tell you that oral contraceptives will absolutely destroy your microbiome. So not a fan. But yeah, I primary offenders in my mind are allergy medications, the birth control pill, anything that is changing your mucosal secretions.
PPIs.
PPIs, absolutely, yes. How could I forget those?
Speaking of all that, can you please talk about histamine issues and MCAS and this product?
Yeah, so as I noted earlier, I always use bifido strains with histamine issues. Bifido strains are fantastic for helping to rebalance and support the microbiome and support the gut lining when it comes to histamine issues. So I for this formula also from the standpoint of how it helps with the nervous system, always I'm working with the nervous system when it comes to histamine issues. So, there's a leaky gut component. And I will say this too, like every person that I've worked with who has histamine issues has a slightly different landscape. So it's difficult to make a blanket statement, but I do like this formula for those folks who are dealing with MCAS.
Dr. Allison Seebecker has redone her website, SIBOinfo.com, and she talks about a lot on the website about probiotics and SIBO. Okay, we have fast rapid fire here, final minute. Any side effects at all seen from this probiotic combo?
The only side effect I've seen is that it is too sedating for some people.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Knocks them out.
Is it best to check, what is it? We already talked about that, the oats test. What do you think of the product 5-HTP?
Yeah, for some people it works really well. I don't love giving 5-HTP for everybody. Like it's one of those things that I don't love having on the health food store shelves. So I would consult with somebody before you take it.
Yeah. They do have a microbiome test at Microbiome Labs, and you do get 15% off that. However, there is no interpretation as part of that. So you would need to take the test results and go to your provider. One woman misunderstood what I said, and she came after me for months demanding that I interpret her test.
Oh.
I'm not qualified for that. And I also am just telling you right now, there's no interpretation if you decide to get any microbiome, vaginal or stool testing at Microbiome Labs. You need to take that result and take it to your provider. And a list of providers is added. There's like, you are on your own, but you are smart people and you know what to do when you get a test result. You can put it in ChatGPT, but I love working with a provider. But it'd be kind of nice to have that information show up at the provider, check in advance that they know how to read a stool test or a microbiome test. And then you save the visit of when you like go to the provider and go, hey, let's order a microbiome test. Like, you can speed things up within reason, use your common sense. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Okay. I experience insomnia taking tryptophan. Will this product be a problem for me? Sounds really individualized there.
Yeah, I would.
Like, I'm wondering why the tryptophan is doing that for you. So, okay, then let's see. Thank you for, you're welcome. Lizanne, does bio-individual hormone therapy, menopause, negatively or positively affect the microbiome? I would think it helps, but microbiome thing. Well, HRT can help, but what do you think, Dr. Achuff? That's what I've heard other experts say.
Yeah, no, I agree that it helps. Yeah.
You know, Jody, a lot of people, a lot of providers are familiar with Microbiome Labs products. They're really popular. And so, you know, I think if you go to IFM, the Institute for Functional Medicine, and you find some people there, and then when you reach out to them and you say, I'm using Microbiome Lab products, are you familiar? You have to be your own detective and your own advocate. And I know everyone's tired and you don't feel well so often, and I'm so sorry about that. We are trying to make it easier for you, but those are some resources for you. So I wish you all the best of health. Dr. Achuff, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Very welcome.
Fantastic. Yeah,
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
really great to have you. And we will catch you another time. And to everyone else, thank you so much for coming. And I do hope you can take advantage of the coupon and take advantage of this fabulous formulation. Everyone's different, but I think it's definitely worth exploring and experiencing at least one bottle to see if, you know, it can be a solution for you, because it sounds fantastic. And my husband and I have been taking it and we have been so enjoying it. Like, when was the last time I said that about a supplement, that I was enjoying it? So that's a pretty big statement for me. So wishing you all the best. Thanks, Barb, for coming in. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And if you did want to take advantage of those coupons, be sure to check around this video. Thanks, everybody. Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, Shivan. Take care.